Okay, so we spent some time talking about characterizing random variables, such as writing down the random variable form, discrete, continuous, expected value, variances, sums of random variables, central limit theorem. These all we will use a lot in this course. Another very important aspect that I want to touch upon before we complete this topic is what are the criteria for making these decisions? What are the objectives? What are the settings? These are things that we'll talk about in the next few slides. Okay, the treatment is not going to be mathematical. All right. So, what are the optimization criteria? So, we talked about the characterization of uncertainty, right? So, now we want to say, okay, we talked about uncertainty. The course is about decision making under uncertainty. So, we spend a little bit of time talking about making decisions. To do that, it is important to figure out what criteria you're going to use to optimize. Now, there's a wonderful book. If you've not read this, I would highly recommend it. This is a book called The Goal. The Goal is written by a person by the name of Eliyahu Goldratt, and Goldratt's book is an amazing book. I would highly recommend to anybody interested in a topic like this. Now, essentially, Goldratt says that the main criteria for any company, especially if it's a for-profit business, is to maximize the amount of money that is made. Okay, while this is extremely important, sometimes it's not easy to translate. Okay, it's not easy to translate the alternate decisions. What is the effect of these alternate decisions on what monetary values? Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you're a company that produces, let's say, computers or something like that, and then you're saying, okay, now maybe I should try something which would try a few alternatives, such as let's say I go online. Let's take the example that Dell did. It is not clear to them going online how much of an improvement in monetary value they're going to get. Okay, so they might use some other alternative ways of actually measuring things. So there are so one does several criteria as a combination. We'll see some of that a little bit later, but let's look at a simple example. Okay, so let's say you are a dentist, as an example, and you open an office to practice dentistry. Okay, now you have two choices. Now both are extraordinarily reasonable. The first choice is you provide phenomenal care for a small number of patients. So you take a small number of patients, they're all extremely happy, you provide great care, and if you ask them, they'll say, I have never met a dentist like you. Okay. On the other hand, there are a gazillion people outside that who are dying to have you as their doctor or their dentist, but you're not available to them. Okay. Now your alternative option is to provide good enough care for a large number of patients. So that means I'm not providing phenomenal care, but I'm providing good enough, something that would pass any test, but it's not phenomenal. So that's your choice. Now, when it comes to making money, it is possible that both are equally good. It's not clear which one would be better, and that's what I was trying to say here, that it's not clear sometimes. You want to maximize the amount of money you make, but it's not clear which decision is going to result in a better monetary value. So there are those kinds of caveats to be careful about. Now, the question is, what do the decisions mean in terms of some other metrics that we're all probably very interested in? If you start a dentist's office, you want to be sure that you want to impact people, you want to have a lot of impact on people. You want to make sure that you stay profitable, and also you want to stay self-satisfied. Now, for example, this same course that we're talking about, NPTEL is a way of making sure that everybody has access to good education. So therefore, what they're saying is, well, let us try and cater to a larger audience, impacting more people, and therefore, I, for example, definitely signed up to do this because it gives a lot of self-satisfaction. Okay. So one does not normally do everything necessarily for the sake of profit, but there's also other things like impact and satisfaction. All right, there are other optimization criteria that we need to talk about, especially for not-for-profit like universities and academic institutions, as well as governmental organizations. And many times businesses also use these as a proxy for money. Okay, now let me take an example. let's take an example of an educational institution. Now, we are usually trading off between cost, quality of the product, like if you're a company, you're making a product, or the quality of care if you're a healthcare or a service, the timeliness, how much on time things are, and the availability. So these are other metrics that one typically uses. So now coming back to our educational institution that is typically not for profit, a good objective would be to maximize the quality of students graduating. Okay, now I firmly believe that is a very good objective, which is to maximize what students are graduating out of the university. Now, one could achieve that objective. How does one do that? One could achieve that objective by being extremely restrictive in terms of admission. This is what a lot of times is done in a place like IIT. They're extraordinarily restrictive in terms of who they admit. Another option would be to spend a whole lot of money and increase a lot of resources, which is what the government is doing right now. They are in India. They are building a lot of IITs. They are spending a lot of money improving the resources. That's another way to do this. So that could be something that one could do. Now, the actions could also change when your aims are different and your constraints are different. Okay, so it's not like this is the so it's very crucial. My point here is that it's very crucial to pick the right objective. That's why I kind of said it's important to know what are you trying, what's your aim, what are you trying to maximize or minimize if it's a cost, and your actions, the best thing to do could really depend on what aims you have as well as what are your constraints. Now, this is a fact of life. Okay. It is very difficult to provide all of the following. You cannot give low cost and high quality and highly timely stuff as well as high availability. It's not possible to do all this. You always have to give in. Something has to give in, especially when you have constrained resources. Now, take this NPTEL course for example. This course for sure is low cost for the people who are taking the course. For sure, it is highly timely, and that means you can view it anytime. Yes, you have to start at the beginning of a semester, but other than that, it is somewhat timely. You don't have to wait a whole lot. There are other courses which are even more timely. High availability, nobody stops you from taking it. You can go ahead and take it. Now, quality, that is the question. I do know that if you are face to face in a classroom, obviously the quality is higher than what is provided here, but we are trying our level best. Now, there are many such examples in life that you could think about. Now, for example, the dentist office, where they were trying to keep the cost low, they were trying to keep the quality high. The dentist office was trying to keep it at a low cost, high quality, and also highly timely, but not highly available. That is because it's very difficult to get an appointment if you want to keep your costs low, if you want to keep your quality high. That means your times are all going to be taken, and you also want to be timely. That means everybody who starts an appointment at a certain time will get their appointment. You got everything in there, then your availability is going to get hit because you're not going to be able to schedule everybody inside. So like that, you can think of multiple examples where 3 out of the 4 can be satisfied, but the 4th is going to be incredibly hard. All right, now that's not terribly crucial for this course. Okay, I just wanted to mention that as a comment. Now, once we establish the criteria, we also have to figure out what is the objective. Okay, now we talked about the expected value. Now, that is a very common objective, and a common objective is to maximize the expected benefit or minimize the expected loss. But is maximizing the expected value appropriate for a one-time decision? What I mean by that is, you make a decision exactly once. Why would you do the best on average? Wouldn't you be thinking about something else? For example, you could think of maximizing the worst case benefit, okay? Or you could take the most likely benefit and maximize that. You could also minimize what is called regret. Okay. Now, minimizing regret is rare for a company unless one is the CEO. You are probably more likely to do minimize regret when you are talking about individuals making decisions. We will talk about all these things in the next topic of one-time decisions, which will be topic 2. We will go over all this. What should be a criteria to use, okay, for one-time decisions? Should it be maximize the expected value? What are the other options? Now, if you're doing repeated decisions, it does make sense to use the expected value because you are repeating the day, doing day after day after day. So on things average out. So that's the reason it's not a bad idea at all to use expected value in the situation where you're repeating a decision. You could also look at other risk measures. There's something called CVAR, conditional value at risk, which is very popular. There are things like that you may be able to find online. Now, there is another thing that's important too. Who do you want to maximize? Okay, now many times your population is very important, like we saw in the case of the dentist. Now, if your population is you are providing excellent care for a small number of your patients, you are providing terrible care for the people who are not your patients. Okay, that means they are not even getting to see you. So on the other hand, so in some sense you have to be sure that you have clearly identified your population. So your objective could be, I want to maximize my sales in India. I want to maximize the quality of students among those that graduate. Okay, so we're not saying we are going to look at all the students, but only ones that graduate. People who don't graduate, we are not concerned about their quality because you're not going to get a degree from our school. All right. We talked about quality of the patients. All right. Another thing that we want to say is there is a issue of what is the best decision that is socially optimal. What is good for everybody may not be good for an individual. There are many such examples that we could think about, and it's important for us to worry about how do we do as an individual. Now, many of these topics fall more under the game theory side, which we will not get into. However, you see, many times you're really mad at the government for making a decision. However, if you think about it, they are not trying to make your life best, but they're trying to say, okay, what is best for the population as a whole? And that's the reason you have things like the democracy, because you do want to see what works for everybody taken in an aggregate way. So these are good things to remember in life for sure. Our course will, fortunately won't go into some of these nitty-gritties, but we'll keep our objectives very straightforward. Okay. The last slide in this set of topics is what types of decisions. Okay, so there are multiple types of decisions that one can consider. So we talked a little bit about one-time decisions and multiple-time decisions. Now, for example, if you think about the cricket example, there is something somewhere in between, something called few times. So let's say you're playing a 20-20 match, then 20 times you have to make the decision who's going to bowl, okay, as a captain. So that's a few times decision. It's not a lot. It's also not one time. But a one-time decision would be you toss a coin. Heads would mean, okay, I am deciding to bat or I'm deciding to bowl. Okay, so that's a one-time decision. And there are also some other multiple decisions, like when the decisions are a lot, like if you're looking at a ball by ball in a test match, where you want to bowl as a bowler, it could be something that's a multiple type of decision. Okay. Now let's look at the next example, which is a finite horizon versus infinite horizon. They kind of related to the previous topic. A finite horizon would mean I have a few decision points where needs to be made, and the infinite horizon is a case where this goes on and on forever. Now you'd wonder, we all have a finite life, why would I ever be interested in infinite horizon? Well, it turns out that the results mathematically actually are very appealing in the infinite case. Okay, you kind of get very nice results, and that's why a lot of people study infinite horizon. Basically, that means it is multiple times done over a very long period of time. Then there's the issue of centralized versus distributed decisions. Now in supply chain, this is extremely common. That means, do you want to make decisions about inventories in a centralized fashion or a distributed fashion? Now many times you don't have enough information to make distributed decisions at the central level. However, the centralized decisions tend to be on a company-wide level generally more optimal. Now there are trade-offs, and we want to think about how one can go about doing things like that. Now another aspect that is important and somewhat related to centralized and distributed is space related time oriented would be strategic, tactical, and operational decisions. Strategic decision is decisions that you make usually one time or once in a while. Okay, like for example, do I want to install, let's say, a wind farm, okay, in my village? So that is a strategic decision. Then I make tactical decisions, such as how do I who do I write contracts in terms of taking the wind farm energy and try to talk to yearly contracts I might make with a utility company. That's a tactical decision. And then I have to make operational decisions, like every day, how do I buy power and how much power do I sell, and the market price is, you're going to get the market price. You have to make several decisions about the operations on an hourly or a secondly basis. Okay, so that's the strategic, tactical, and operational decisions. Now, you also have this issue. And a lot of companies that I speak with and consult, they tell me something very interesting. As a researcher, I tend to build some very complex models that gives me the optimal solutions. But many times companies are interested in simple, maybe suboptimal solutions. And that is very understandable, because as a person who is not into research, you may not have full appreciation for or may not be able to have full understanding of what it takes to make those decisions. So you want a simple solution that you could quickly think, oh yeah, that makes sense. So there is that issue as well, so it's not that everybody really wants the optimal solution. If something that's reasonably close, a lot of people are very happy. Now, another important part is this issue of nested decisions. Now, this is we will see a little bit of these in our course, especially in the very next topic, where you make one decision and then based on that your next decision follows. And then contingency is, let me give you an example. Let's say you're doing pizza delivery, and you want to decide what all pizzas to put into a particular delivery scooter. Essentially, once you decide to take off the scooter, so that's your first decision, saying, okay, I think I'm leaving now and dropping off my pizzas. Then you're asking, what's your nested decision? What order do I go and deliver the pizza? So that's a secondary decision. So your first decision is what all pizzas I'm going to deliver. The secondary decision, what way do I go? Then I could think of a contingency plan. What if something changes along the way? For example, there's traffic, and then I want to change my plan, and I won't want to go this route. I want to go through a different way. You might also want to reevaluate. That is, you're driving and then you come back closer to your restaurant, and then your manager calls you and say, hey, can you pick up a couple more pizzas? Anyway, you're close by. You might want to do that and reevaluate your decision. So we do this a lot of times. And finally, I do want to say one other thing. We almost the entire course, except in one situation, we will talk about where there's only one player. But at times you might be in situations where there are multiple players and you want to come up with strategies. And these fall under what is called games. Okay, game theory is what is used to solve some of this. We will touch upon this in one topic, but mostly we will not be in this situation. But I do want to say that a lot of people work on this topic of games or even auctions. Okay, there are multiple players and they get into an auction. Or even competition. So these are things where you have to make a decision, understanding or thinking about what others will do. This is like playing chess, or this is like playing football. Things like where you think about what the other person would do in order for you to make a decision, and you adapt quite a bit as you go along. Okay, so that is another level of decision making, which we won't do for the most part in this course. Okay, so this brings us to the end of topic 1. Okay, thank you.